Alright, looks like it's time to get started. Thank you for coming to another lightning design review for Windows Phone. My name is Lincoln Anderson, and I'm with 352 Media Group. I'm going to be looking at, I think we have 8 apps today, and we're just going to be focusing on design and looking at what we can do to tweak them and improve them and layout and aesthetics and just take better advantage of Windows Phone design language as well as just general design tips that I'll come up with on the fly. So let's dive into it. The app that we're going to look at is a game where you guess the capital of particular countries. So it's one question at a time, and you get points for answering the question correctly from a list of multiple choice answers. The page of this app, I've seen a lot of sort of start pages for apps like this that have it's almost like a live tile treatment or like an application tile treatment, and I think there are a couple challenges with this type of layout. One is you're always, if you're imitating something that's built into the operating system, you kind of have to be good about getting it right. For example, looking at some of these tiles, they're almost square, but they're not quite square, so it almost looks like someone tried to make live tiles but didn't do it quite right. So even though it doesn't look terrible, you can read everything and see the icons, it's just something about it looks a little off. The second issue that I have with these types of layouts is that everything's on the screen, but everything's also the same size, and it's the same treatment. And so if you think about how people are going to approach this app and the most common things that they're going to want to do right away versus things that really could be out of the way, but they're there when you need them, like let's say support or more apps. You want to make those things available, but they're not as important as like the play button. I would say that's the most important thing. And so layouts like this, they kind of just treat everything the same across the board, and so there's not really a lot of hierarchy to it. And so it forces the user to kind of distinguish for themselves what's really important out of this list of 6 things. So I would recommend, and there's a lot of ways you can handle it, but I did a quick mock-up of something. This is just what I've put, I think, the support option, I put that down in the app bar. So it's a collapsed app bar. It's there if the user needs it. They can expand the app bar on the bottom. All the other options are still on the screen. I've just highlighted the things that I think are most important. Play, rankings, and list of capitals. Just in terms of gameplay. Just kind of highlighted those in red. I've made them larger. And then down below, I'm providing access to those other options. The ability to rate the app or get more apps. And the icons you see here are just kind of placeholders. But the general idea is that you separate what are the key user scenarios, the things that you really want to make players aware of right away, and give them a little bit different of a treatment than things that are not quite as important, but you still want to make available. Diving into itself, this is where you would actually be asked a question, what's the capital of Jamaica, and they have your options. Here you can see there's a timer countdown, I guess that's 17 seconds, and then your point total. Then down on the bottom of the screen you've got game show-like options for, I guess it's skipping a question, 50-50, where 2 of them are knocked out, or you could choose to add more time. I think these are like one-time type of options. You can only do this once. Use each one of these options once per game. So right away you can see that there's I think the buttons down on the bottom are using kind of the typical style of Windows Phone controls. They're using the Seago font set, which is really clear and easy to read. And they're also, that if you're using something that looks like a button, it's a button. If you contrast that with the options themselves, Burn, Flying Fish Cove, they almost look like little plaques or little placards, and it's not apparent to me right away that they're a button. I mean, I would probably tap on them just because most things on the phone are interactive, but it's adding, and especially if you look at the top area where you see the seconds and the point total, there's a lot of little boxes going on, and I'm not quite sure what all the little lines and rectangles are for. So a lot of what the Windows Phone design language focuses on is removing distractions and focusing on the content, the things that are important. So I have a mock-up for this. I just want to kind of go over some of the details, like the hourglass icon. That's a great icon to represent that time is ticking down. But again, it's like a real clip art type photo, as opposed to like the iconography that you would see on the phone, which is like flat vector graphics. So I'll dive into the mock-up that I did, just kind of a different take on it. Again, there's different ways of doing this, but I think making the question the most prominent thing on the page, it's a little larger, making the options very clearly. You could make them just button controls, just the default style. Or I thought sometimes what users will want to do when they're playing a game like this is they'll want to check off an option that's kind of their gut instinct, but then they know that they have like 30 seconds left, so they kind of want to think about it a little bit and see if read the rest of the answers and make sure that they're confident before they kind of lock it in. So you can make it a two-step process. That might be cumbersome, so that's just one idea I'm throwing out. But down at the bottom, there's more of a typical hourglass icon. I think what would be neat if you made it really large like this is you could actually make like a XAML storyboard where the sand in the hourglass is actually going down, like an animation, as the time is ticking down. So you get a visual sense of the icon itself animating along with the time in seconds ticking down on the right. The options, I just moved those into the app bar and made them icons. The position of them in the original comp, they were already down on the bottom, so it's just simply a matter of putting them down in the bar. And you could use different icons if you want, but they're already in that position, so it would just use kind of the default app bar construct to keep those controls in there. You can see also, like, if this was the user's accent color, the red color, I'm using that as a highlighting. I'm using that in the title as well to highlight the country that the question is relevant to. And I think that's kind of important in this particular game, because I think every single question is going to be, what is the capital of something? So to just make the name of the country itself highlighted really just pops out at the user, and their eye is just going to scan that right away. They don't have to hunt around for it. The rankings page, this is pretty straightforward. This is just a high scores page. The only thing that I had to say about this was that I think general is, and I'm basing this off of the context of today being another option in this pivot. General is probably like all time or something like that, or forever, or something like that. A label like that might be more appropriate. I don't know, from the word general, it's a little bit too general of a term. I don't know if that means worldwide or local, or based by difficulty level. So I would just make it a little bit more descriptive. All time, worldwide, global, whatever the general term means. I just wanted to plug this site again, because many of you might find it valuable. This is the Windows Phone Design Bootcamp link, and if you search for Windows Phone Design Bootcamp, it'll come right up. But this has a series of videos that start out really general, just talking about design and philosophy of Windows Phone design and the grid system. And they get more technical and help you plan out your app as you go down. So you can jump into these videos one at a time if you want, or you can just kind of schedule some time for yourself each day to go through it more like a course or something. Jumping back into the views, the second one we're going to look at is a similar quiz game, not specifically for capitals. It's just more general, but it's like it's in the similar game show type format. So this game, the start screen launches up, and I think this isn't atypical to have like everything in like I think this is Seago Black and it's all in caps and stuff, but I think it's kind of fun. I think it's kind of fun. I would just recommend, like, where you type in your name, I would almost add that as an intermediary step once you click play. I think if this is the first screen the user sees, it's a little bit weird for it to be like a form, like asking you for your name right away. Like, I want to see what my options are, and then once I decide, yeah, play, then, you know, it would pop up a dialogue that would say, enter your name, and then the game would start. The other thing about this screen was that the title on the top is just kind of crunched up against the top edge of the screen. I think typically in the pivot controls the text is a little bit smaller. If you end up making the text smaller, or like a little logo for this app or something along the top is like a little banner, that probably won't be an issue. But if you're, I don't know, I guess I would say if you're going to keep it the way it is, I would probably just make the text smaller so you can read the full name of it. Yeah. I would also, I've seen a couple of icons like this where it looks like a tile, and then there's like a circle button inside of it. And, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I think it's almost looks like one type of control nested inside of another. I wonder if this just wouldn't be fine to have the help tile have just a question mark on it, or just use circle buttons. I mean, I would just kind of choose one or the other. You're going to use circle buttons or more of a tile format. But otherwise, this looks pretty cool. This is the screen where you would be asked a question. So there's a couple things. I liked how the designer encapsulated the question in like a voice bubble. It's like the voice bubble that you see in the text messaging app, and it gives you a sense that like there's a game show host like asking the question. So I thought that was pretty cool. The top of this page, I see that there's a dollar amount, and then it's sort of the title of it is question 5. I think that if this works the way that I think it does, that you're sort of like your total prize amount that you would win goes up to $5,000 if you get this question right. It's like the game shows where it's like $5,000 is on the line right now. So the way that it looks to me is it's just a little weird that they're separated. Like the 5,000 is over on the top right, almost like a heads-up display in a video game, and then the question 5 is down here. Like I almost want to see them more closely associated. Like I feel like the 5,000 and question 5, that's kind of, you're sort of at the rank of question 5, and that is $5,000. So those things are really closely related. I might just make them a little bit bigger and center them, just to make it feel like, I don't know, a little bit more of like a game show board. But everything else I think makes sense on the screen. Good use of the app bar. You've got phone a friend and ask the audience. I don't know what those actually do, if it like goes out and actually asks people the answer to the question. But those are, this is the high score screen for this app. I think this makes sense. I don't know what happens when you have more high scores, if these are just the high scores on the phone, or this is like a worldwide ranking. So I don't know if this scrolls. I only see 3 right now. But I would just, you know, if you consider having more than, if it's not just a top 3, you know, I would consider how you want this to look when there's potentially 100 high scores. The other thing I might consider is making the prize amount, the 50,000 or the 5,000, making that a little bit larger. Like I think on a high score screen, the most important things are the name of the person and the money, or the point total, or whatever it is that they got. So I would just make that, I would make the money a little bit bigger, and you could put the name and the money side by side. The date and the time is a little less important, and you might even want to abbreviate that a little bit. Like I may not need to know that at 4:47 and 31 seconds that he got this. Like, you know, you could kind of say 4 p.m. or 4:47. It just looks a little bit more like rich data that you don't really need right now, to the average user. So the other thing that I was going to say about this screen was, oh yeah, I would imagine that once a player or once a lot of players start repeating games here, they're probably going to hit 7 million at some point, or they'll have scores that are really uncommon. They'll be, here you can see there's already 2 people that have 5,000. There's probably going to be a lot of people that have the same score. So I was just going to suggest to the developer that you might consider like the total time that they took to answer all the questions as like another vector of performance. So you can see if there's like multiple high scores of 7 million, you can see who did it the fastest. But that's more of just a quality concept and design. So again, this is the app bar just expanded, and you can see what the labels are for the circle buttons, which I think is useful because it may not be obvious right away. With a lot of apps, a plus button is just adding a new record to whatever the scope of the screen is you're looking, and it's obvious. These are kind of custom, and they're game controls. So adding those little buttons is useful. I just think this is a great use of the app bar. The things that the user might need, but you don't want to clutter up the screen with, are down in the expanded bar. Settings and the ability to quit the game. So that looks good. The third app we're going to look at is called SkinScan, and this is an app that allows the user to take a little picture of a mole or a skin defect, and the app will analyze whether it's something that's dangerous that they should get checked out, or whether it's just like a harmless freckle or something. And there are additional options able to get a second opinion from a doctor or whatnot. So diving into this app, so this is the start screen. I like this. I think it's pretty clean. It's also like the color choices I think are appropriate for like a medical type of app where, if someone's using this app, they're probably really concerned. So having it kind of like bright and open is a little refreshing as opposed to like a black background or something like that. The scan button up here, I don't think it's terrible, but I think when you pivot around, you can see there's a little bit of a hint of another pivot view over here. I think when you pivot around, it's gonna be in a weird position because every other screen is gonna have a title in that position, and here that's like our main interaction. And it almost, I hate to say this, but it almost seems like a banner ad. Like my eye almost jumps down to these options where the circle buttons and the labels are, because that's what I'm accustomed to actually tapping on. So I would consider giving the scan button more of a typical treatment of a like circle button in text or something, but maybe just making it a little bit bigger, or continue using the accent color of orange that you have here to make it stand out a little bit. But I just think the position of it is, I think it's centered. Nothing else on the screen is centered. It's just a little bit out of place. The other thing I was going to mention was down on the bottom, there's My Skin connects with Microsoft Health Vault. So I think My Skin is either it's a system or it's the author of the app. The issue that I have with it is these things are like bigger than, or they're as big as the interactive items on the page. So I think it's good they're on the bottom. It's kind of like a little footer that's just kind of like, by the way, here's who's providing these services. But it might be more appropriate to make these a little smaller, or to put them on an about page or something like that. Another thing that you could do is if there's some sort of a setup page, like an account setup page for this app before you even get to this screen, where, I don't know, maybe you log into an account or something, maybe putting it there as just sort of a, like, this app is brought to you by, but I don't know that it needs this. Like, this is going to be the page that they see on every time they boot up this app. They're going to see this page. I don't know that they need to see that every time they open up the app. So, okay, I'll stop harping on that. So, this is the screen you would get when you're scanning something to see, whether it's dangerous or not. So you basically just take a photo. I like the way that the designer has highlighted the area that the photo is going to be cropped to with the square. I think that's something that'll immediately make sense to the user. There's a little hint underneath it. Focus it in the center of the square. But I think it's obvious enough that may not even be needed. Only thing about this screen would be that these circle buttons are, they're almost in an app bar. If they were just a little bit lower in an app bar, so I mean, I would just toss them in an app bar and put them down there. Those, depending on the model of phone you have, the app bar might be a little bit easier for your thumb to reach, just, it being in a consistent place with every other app that's out there. So this is the screen where once you snapped a photo, you would choose on your body where it exists. So I think the interaction for this screen is that you could actually pan around and zoom on the photo of the human. And you can see down below you can turn them around to the back or choose a female model. If those interactions are correct, then I think this is great. Only thing that's a little weird to me on the bottom, the dotted line around that container, is it almost looks like a coupon or something. So again, I think it might appear to someone to be a banner ad or something that they're supposed to drag, or so. I just don't know. So I would recommend just maybe just sectioning that off to a plain gray background, and if you can, make the photo a little bit larger, because I think that's probably a good confirmation for the user as they're on the screen that they know the photo that they just took is good as they're working on this step. So going to the next screen, this is where you see the result for the analysis on the photo that you took. So the screen's pretty good. Again, I mean, I think this app is pretty clean. I have some suggestions on how to be done a little bit differently. So, take or leave any of these suggestions, but I think that including the image of where the mole is located on the person, on the graphic you just took, I think that would be cool. Here it's in the original it says chest, and you could still include that. You could keep that, but if you could find a way to actually include the place where you actually tapped on the body, I think that would be cool. I moved moderately suspicious lesion. I moved that up because to me that's like the most important thing. Like I want to know what. This is just the first thing on the screen. I want to know what the outcome was. I also used the color swatch as a little square next to the title just to help the user understand that this bar is a relative scale and that the orange correlates to the title and the position on the bar, just to help tie those two things together a little bit better. Down on the bottom, I moved a couple of these tile-like options to circle buttons just to give you an idea of how that treatment could be done a little bit better. I think, in the best case, it actually affords you more room to describe what your options are in a little bit more detail. So here you can, here it says send to doctor. Here we can say send to dermoscopist and actually put a little subtitle of, why you would want to do that. You want a second opinion from a doctor. So, circle button treatment, I think it just might give you some more options to, illustrate things a little bit better. This is where you would see a second opinion. Yeah, you actually sent it off and someone's commenting. You can, this is pretty good. I would just recommend if you saw the voice bubble treatment earlier, that was like a box with a just a little triangle off to the side. It's very similar to what you have here, but it's just more of the typical voice bubble style that you're used to seeing in messaging apps. The triangle is kind of off to the side and a little bit skewed as opposed to being this gray outline box with like a centered triangle. So just a really minor stylistic thing. The fourth app we're going to look at is, I think this is how you pronounce it, FiuFiu. It's a game. And so a lot of the stuff that we talk about, Windows Phone design language, probably won't apply because this has like a really unique feel to it. It's got this like hand-drawn vector graphic feel. And I don't think it's completely out of place for Windows Phone because like it's all kind of like flat vector graphics. So, you can see the iconography in the heads-up display. There's a little grenade down in the bottom left corner. There's a pause button on the upper right. The heart for how much life you have. These are like simple vector icons, so they kind of actually do have the kind of Windows Phone feel to them, but you know, the game does have its own hand-drawn style. The only thing that I would offer on this game was on this opening screen. I've seen plenty of games like this where it just has a splash screen and you just tap it to start playing. But I was thinking that down in the bottom, just kind of crunched here on the bottom, it says tap to play. I wondered if there was some way to make tap to play feel more interactive. So I don't know what kind of options you have with this screen given the game architecture, but it might be neat if there was like a little character who had like a play icon on his belly or something, and like you tap that and like he gets mad or something, just to make it a little bit more of a immediate, like when you have something that looks like a button, like the player wants to click on it right away. You don't have to like tell them to do it through instructions. So I'd play around with that a little bit. This looks really fun, looks cool. The fifth app we're going to look at is called ShopInTV. The idea behind this app is there's a whole back-end infrastructure to it that's really fascinating. But the Windows Phone experience is that you could watch TV, and your Windows Phone app would magically know what you're watching, and it would offer information about products that were featured on the show. And you know where you could buy them, or you know more detail about the products. So this app is in its wireframe stages. So the developer's architecting out what's going to be on each screen and what the general layout might look like. So my first question, and this is more just about the functionality and the architecture of the app, was I'm looking at I think this is just the screen that you would land on when you just were kind of opening up the app, and it was just being really smart and delivering you to the right show right away. I wondered if the initial experience, like a feed of the products, might be a little bit better, because I imagine as you're watching the show, there's going to be new items popping up. And if a new item came into view and what I'm looking at right now just kind of like disappeared or something, and then something else replaced it, I might be a little bit frustrated. I'm like, hey, I was in the middle of reading that. But if you had a feed, like a list, and new things kept popping up on the list, almost like a social networking feed where you can just kind of see things. It's not disruptive. You can just see, hey, there's 3 new things for you to check out. That might be interesting. And then when you tap on one of those, you can see a lot of detail about the specific product. The other comment about this screen was just that there's not a lot of visual hierarchy to it. So I can see that there's a treatment of a photo with a caption. There's also a text block that it just has some Latin and stuff in there. So I'm not really sure what that's for yet. And then there's a full screen, or a full picture of the actor holding the product. So I'm not quite sure if there's like a hierarchy to these. Like maybe the ones on the left are like links to a blog post about it, and maybe the things on the right are just general information. So I would use spacing and subtitles to actually explain what all of these things are and what the significance of them is. If I as the user, I want to know, if I tap on this thing, is it going to take me to Amazon where I can buy it, or am I going to read an article about it? So I would just make sure that you clearly label that stuff and provide some hierarchy. The next app we're going to look at is called the Football app, and this is basically just app for reviewing scores and statistics of different teams. And let's jump into it right now. It's pretty clean. I like a lot of what's going on in this app. So a couple of comments. Something about the go-to videos tile on the bottom just looks weird. And I keep coming back to this, but the title is kind of smushed against the bottom. Like if you look at the horizontal or the vertical position of the text on the tile to the left of it, and then you just move your eye over, the text is a little bit lower, and you can tell there's just not enough margin there. It's really close to the edge. So again, this is just one of those things where the tiles just kind of just look a little weird. But otherwise, there's Chrome in various pages of this app along the top, like where you can see Premier League underneath the title of the app, where it's very minimal, so I'm being really nitpicky, but there's sort of this gradient thin line on the top and the bottom of it, and I think that you might be able to make a more striking app by just using blocks of color instead of little lines and gradients and stuff that just kind of add visual noise. I'm going to show you an example in a second that is pertinent to this screen. So this is a stats screen. Once you drill into the app a little bit deeper, you can look at a particular game and see how one team did versus the other on all sorts of stats. And so there's a couple screens like this in this application where the actual content is boxed in. It's boxed into like a little table. And I don't know that that's really necessary. I did a comp. I'll just kind of compare side. So I think you can use text size and headings and margins to communicate all the same information and make it feel a little bit more open and less cramped. I also feel like if you add a little bit more space between the individual stat bars here, it's more clear what label pertains to what bar. So like if I look at, let's see, Aerial Duels 1, I think it pertains to the bottom, the bar that's right underneath it, but it might pertain to the one that's on top. They're really close, so it's not visually apparent to me right away, with the pairing between the label and the bar. On the right, I added a little bit more space in between them, so it's a little more clear. I also, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I used on the left side the color of one team, and on the right side the color of another team. That's probably tough to do, to make them visually distinct across any possible matchup that you could ever have. So you might just want to stick with the colors that you're using and just clean up the layout a little bit more. The other thing I did, if you look at the top of the screen, is I just kind of simplified the shapes that are being used in this sort of Chrome. I just removed a lot of the little lines and just kind of opened it up a little bit. It's the same. I mean, it's almost the same exact thing in terms of a banner across the top, but it's just a little bit simplified. It completely gets all the same information across. We know there's a little football players. It's a football game. But it's just the lines are a little bit cleaner, and I just think it's a little bit more. It's going to look a little bit more sharp on the display. The last thing I did was I just added a little bit more padding around the game details itself, like the gray area, and that was just because I felt like it was a little bit cramped on the left. Underneath each one of the team names, added a little bit of padding. And that carries over to this screen as well. This is just where you would see various games that are going on today, and I just think a little bit more padding on each one of these games would open it up a little bit more. And then also, I would play around with maybe not boxing everything in on this screen. There's a box for the date and the time. There's a little box for the league name, and you just may not need to box everything in. Last thing I'll say about this is that I think everything in the game area is in bold, or maybe it's using the black font or semi-bold, but it's just really heavy. And sometimes if you take an interface and you make everything bold, it's almost like nothing's bold. It's almost like a room full of people screaming. You can't hear anything. So I think bolding the score itself, great, because that's that's really important and it's big and bold. But I don't know if the title, the team names themselves need to be bold. This screen is where you would just read news. So I mean, this is pretty straightforward. I would consider putting the title of the article before the date, and just make it. I think they're the same font size. I might make the title a little bit larger and the date and time a little bit smaller. You certainly want to know how fresh your news is, but I feel like the headline is really the most important thing on this screen. I'd also consider adding a little bit of margin between the articles. The text runs together a little bit here, and if there's just a little bit more space in between them, it would be very clear, and I would pan down and read the rest of the article and understand that that's a separate article. So the next app we're going to look at is called PhotoFly, and so this another app which I'm only looking at this one screen, but there's a whole lot of really cool features that the designer has planned out. And they'll basically you'll be able to overlay a photograph with different 3D or different scenic elements, and it'll keep track of it like a 3D scene, and you'll be able to do things like have sort of a parallax effect when you're flying through the scene. So it sounds really fun. There's a lot of options on this screen, and my recommendation to just kind of declutter this a little bit would be to allow the user to kind of address one thing at a time. You might want to do that with a pivot control. So you might have a pivot that has a section for editing, and then you have your top 3 options. Then you have another section for sharing, and you have maybe the different, what do you have, SkyDrive or email or social networks or something, different options on that screen. So so you may actually be able to expose a lot more stuff, but just divide it up into a pivot so you're panning through those different sections a little bit better. I might also move the delete into maybe an app bar item, or one of the pivots could have like additional options on it where the delete could exist. Last thing I'll say about this screen, I did think it might be cool if if you do have more of like a pivot or like a panorama view that's like multiple screens, your photo preview itself could actually be really big, and as you pan left and right through the pivots, you're also panning through the photo itself on the top if it was just like a really large banner. I think people will have really cool photos that they're using in this app to really showcase them and make it big. Could be cool. So last thing about this app was that I think the circle buttons are not using the Seago symbols, so the arrow doesn't look quite right. It looks like a little thinner, and it looks like it has maybe rounded end caps, and it's a little pointier than the arrow normally is. So I would just use the Seago symbol font set just to make it consistent with the rest of the circle buttons that are out there. Next look at is called Show Me How. This app is really sharp. I think this is the last one we're going to look at. This is an app where you can learn how to do a lot of things, and it kind of gives you step-by-step instructions on, I don't know, how to make a smoothie or how to tie a tie or whatever. And the designer included the whole navigation flow in their submission. So I thought this was really cool. I recommend that everybody do this, even if your app is you only consider it to be a 1-page or 2-page app. I would still do this. You might find that once you just sketch it out, you find that there's a need for organizing things a little bit differently. So I thought this was a really cool wireframe. Diving into the app design itself, this is the opening panorama. So this is typically if you want to showcase a panorama, this is how you do it, and then you're only seeing one slice at a time. So this is not a landscape view of the phone. This is, you would see the menu, and then you would pan over to featured, and then you pan over to new. So this is really clean. I think this is really fun and bold. They used all caps. I think that's the Seago black font for the titles of the titles of each one of the how-tos, and I think it's unconventional, but I also think it's exciting, just like that quiz app we were looking at earlier. It's, it makes you want to do the thing, just because it's like bold and exciting and colorful. So I really like how this is laid out. The designer had a question about how to make it a little bit more, they felt like it was a little too plain. So how could they make it a little bit more interesting? And, well, I guess first of all, I disagree. I think it looks great. But if you wanted to add a little bit more color, if you find like your app is a little bit washed out, like one idea, you can add color up top in the banner. I think that this is a much cleaner way of adding some color and just some visual interest, as opposed to, doing like watermarks or like some photo in the background that just messes everything up and makes things hard to read. I think just a splash of color can go a long way. There was one thing I wanted to say about this app. I think that I'll just skip that. So this is the screen where you can actually read an individual how-to. There's a whole flow around this, and I just cropped it down to focus on these 3 screens. The only thing, I think this looks great. I mean, it's very clear you're going step by step, and the layout of it is great. You've got a photo and description accompanying each step. Everything's very clearly labeled. The only thing that I would suggest is if I'm looking at introduction, I don't know that it's apparent to me right away that swiping to the right or swiping to the left is going to go to another step. Typically, you can see I've done this right here. If you want to give the user a hint that there's more to look at on the right, you can provide a little bit of a peek, just a little bit of a slice of that next page. And that gives the user the impression something's cropped off. There's more that's off screen, and then they'll swipe. I see that there's a little scroll bar down on the bottom, so just like a little indicator of where you are. It's a little green line on the bottom. But that would be very easy to overlook. I think it's kind of a good indicator to let you know maybe how big this how-to is. You can people use scroll bar size to judge how far along they are in a series of steps. So that's cool. But I would definitely provide a little bit of a peek so you know that there's something over there. This is part of the app is that people can actually add their own how-tos, which is pretty neat. So this is the flow for how you would actually add a new how-to, and it sort of gives you a template where you sort of fill in the blank on each one. So I think this is cool. Honestly, I think the way it is pretty straightforward, but I just wondered if once you fill out the title, so let's just look at how this works. I would tap to write the title, that green box, and then I'm not sure what the flow is, if there's like some sort of a dialogue, or I just start typing right away in this area. There's nothing about, I don't see a text box anywhere to type in, so I'm not quite sure what that flow is. So just as a suggestion, I know this takes a lot of the color out of that app, but this is kind of a functional utility section of the app. Here, I've provided more of a what you see is what you get type of interface, where the text box, there's a text box that exists, and it already has some text in it that explains what you're supposed to do, and you can just start typing it right away. And it has the same text treatment. So there's a lot of content management systems out there, let's say for the web, where you type stuff, and then you save it, and then you see the actual page, and it looks different, because the input scheme that you had doesn't have exactly the same type treatment or type size that the result does. So I would just suggest that if you can actually make it nearly identical, then you might have a more satisfying experience for the user. The other thing I did was I just used an icon in the area with the photo, just a photo icon with a little plus sign. I think what you had, again, was obvious, but just kind of using some iconography to streamline it a little bit and give the user a little bit less to have to read might be cool. So that's it for today. Thanks for sticking with me through it. This video and all the other videos will go up on the registration site for the Lightning Design Reviews. We take a couple of days to compile the video and get them up there, so if you want to watch this one again, check back next week. The next session will be on February 7th, so if you have any apps you want to submit, go ahead and get them in before Tuesday. Thank you.